When Lily first came into my life, I never expected it would change everything. We weren't close. I knew about her, of course, but we'd never spent much time together. Our parents had gotten married recently, which came as a surprise to me. However, the real shift happened when Lily moved into our house in Austin. It was supposed to be temporary, just so she could start her new job at a local firm. But her presence immediately transformed everything. At first, I thought her bright energy and openness would get on my nerves. But it didn't. Lily brought something unique into the house right away. She was always busy, whether unpacking her things or laughing on the phone with friends from Chicago. Being around her felt like the world had become more alive, more vibrant. I didn't realize how much she had changed my perspective. We started spending more time together, walking through the streets of Austin, grabbing coffee at local spots, and even discussing movies we watched in the evenings. Talking to her felt easy, and for the first time in a long while, I could relax. She shared her plans for the future, how she was adjusting to life in a new city. She opened up about her dreams, and I found myself listening intently, realizing I hadn't felt this kind of connection with anyone for a long time. As the days passed, I started noticing her more. It was like a slow awakening. I didn't understand right away what was happening. She became more than just my stepsister to me. But I was afraid of those thoughts, though I couldn't ignore them. We laughed, we shared our thoughts, and it all felt so natural, yet unsettling at the same time. Something was changing between us, and I couldn't quite figure out where it was headed. Those first few weeks with Lily marked the beginning of something unknown, and I could feel that what lay ahead would be much more significant. Time passed, and I found myself thinking more and more about how things were shifting with Lily. We continued spending a lot of time together, but now there was an underlying tension in every conversation and in every glance. I couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something between us that neither of us had acknowledged yet, but it was growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, our parents were out for dinner, and it was just the two of us in the house. We sat down to watch a movie, something lighthearted that she picked out, but I couldn't focus. Every little movement she made, the sound of her laughter, the way she absent-mindedly brushed her hair away from her face, it all seemed different, more intense. When the movie ended, she reached for the remote, and our hands touched. It was a brief, accidental moment, but it felt like everything froze around us. We both looked at each other, and I realized in that instant that we had crossed the invisible line. All this time, we had been trying to ignore our feelings, but it was no longer possible. "Alec," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She pulled her hand back, but our eyes remained locked. There was more than just curiosity in her gaze. There was something deeper, something that made it clear we both understood what was happening. I leaned in slowly, and our lips met. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and cautious, as if we were both testing the waters of something we couldn't fully grasp yet. It lasted only a few moments, but in those moments, everything changed. That kiss held everything we had been hiding, our doubts, our emotions, and the truth we were too scared to admit. When we pulled back, Lily looked at me, her eyes filled with questions that neither of us had answers to yet. That kiss had changed everything between us, and I knew that from this point on, nothing would ever be the same. A few days had passed since that evening, but the silence between Lily and me was louder than any words. We kept acting as if nothing had happened, trying to pretend everything was normal. But that kiss, that moment, had changed everything. I could see it in her eyes when we crossed paths in the kitchen, though she avoided looking at me for too long. Every step we took around each other felt calculated, like we were both trying to figure out how to deal with this new reality. One evening, I came home from a long day at work and found Lily sitting alone in the living room, staring out the window. The lights were dim, and the atmosphere was quiet. I sensed that she had been waiting for this moment, the conversation we had both been avoiding. She didn't turn to look at me when I entered, but I knew that we needed to talk. I sat down next to her without saying a word, feeling the tension between us, like a heavy weight in the air. Lily was the first to break the silence, her voice soft but determined. "We can't keep pretending nothing happened," she said, still looking at her hands. Her words echoed in my mind, hitting me with the force of a truth I had been trying to avoid. "I know," I replied, and we both fell silent again, as if unsure of what to do next. But I knew that we had already crossed a line we couldn't step back from. I turned to her, and our eyes finally met. In that moment, all the doubts, fears, and emotions I had been trying to suppress rose to the surface. I realized that Lily had become so much more to me than just a stepsister. I felt it in every conversation, every glance, every moment we spent together. I don't know what's happening between us, but I know one thing. This is more than just being family, I said, my voice carrying the weight of everything I had been holding back. Lily didn't respond immediately. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts, then leaned in and kissed me. This kiss was different, not as tentative as the first, but filled with certainty and the truth we could no longer ignore. As we pulled away, I knew that this conversation had changed everything. There was no going back now. After our conversation and that second kiss, I knew we had reached a point of no return. The truth was out, and we had to face it. Lily had become more to me than just a stepsister. She had become someone I couldn't imagine my life without. The next few days were filled with tension. We avoided any serious conversations with our parents, trying to keep our secret. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't last long. I could see how nervous Lily became when our parents brought up topics about the future or family. We both knew that sooner or later we would have to explain ourselves. One evening, while we were all sitting down for dinner, my dad suddenly spoke up. "You two have been acting strange lately. What's going on?" His question caught us off guard, but we both knew this moment was coming. I felt my heart skip a beat, and Lily glanced away, unsure of how to respond. I knew we couldn't avoid it any longer. The weight of our secret had become too heavy to carry. I looked at Lily, and she gave me a small nod, signaling that we had to be honest. This was the moment. "Dad, Mom, there's something we need to tell you," I began, feeling the tension tightening with each word. Our parents looked at us, waiting for an explanation, and then I said it. "Lily and I, our feelings for each other have changed. This isn't just a normal sibling relationship." The silence that followed was deafening. My mom opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. My dad frowned, as though trying to process what he had just heard. At that moment, everything felt overwhelming, too complicated to untangle. But I knew this was the only way forward. "We're not asking you to understand or even accept it," I continued, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "But we can't pretend anymore. We love each other, and that's the truth." My mom began to cry, while my dad stood up and left the room without saying a word. It was unbearable to stay, so I took Lily's hand, and she squeezed it tightly in return. In that moment, I knew that despite everything, we had done the right thing. We had been honest. Now, whatever happened next was in our hands. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter. And although there were many challenges ahead, I knew that we would walk this path together without looking back.